Hello. I'm a couple minutes late. My name is Brian Iverson. I run product for Tuebora. And today I'm going to talk about actually a topic that's near and dear to my heart, policy-driven IGA. If I can catch my breath. So the question that I think we all have to ask about identity governance administration is who's working for whom? Because honestly, the administrative and procedural bloat that we see with identity governance administration deployments is overwhelming. And basically, we're placing more and more obligations on our business users to make decisions about access risk. In many cases, these are easy decisions that we shouldn't really even need to ask them. And so that's why we want to talk about policy-driven administration. Still catching my breath. But first, I want to disambiguate some things here. There's a lot of talk about policy in identity and access management lately. Policy-driven or policy-based access control is getting a lot of attention these days, a lot of noise being made in the market about the topic. And I want to reinforce that when we're talking about policy-driven administration, we're talking about something different. Policy-driven administration is focused on administration. IGA is focused on the long tail of the legacy of applications in your environment. Easily 90% of the applications in your environment rely on internal authorization based on static assignment of accounts to permissions and resources and other types of objects, let's say. Whereas policy-based access control is focused on runtime authorization, some authentication a little bit, but mostly authorization. This is really relevant for newer applications. It's very, very rare to see these legacy applications, especially third-party applications, being retrofitted with something like attribute-based access control, because honestly, anyone else here with me that think policy-based access control is just a rebranding of attribute-based access control? That was a question that I used to get a lot, was, why do I need to do role-based access when I hear that ABAC is the next big thing? So I'm going to talk some about this. First, let's talk a little bit about taxonomy, because I'm going to use a lot of words that a lot of people use interchangeably, but I want to be very, very explicit about some of the distinctions that we need to make in order to honestly communicate effectively with each other about some of these concepts. So I use an analogy to start out here. Many people, I'm sure, have heard this idea that identity governance administration is like ERP for security. And it's an apt description. So in the world of ERP, and mostly the finance and accounting space, you have two sides of your books, right? You have what can be called the technical side, which is assets, liabilities, owner's equities, the stuff that you get with the balance sheet. This is bank accounts, credit accounts, lines of credit, credit cards, loans, all sorts of different types of monetary instruments. This is the stuff that the CTO cares about, the propeller heads. We really can't expect the business, the day-to-day business, to understand and make good decisions about what goes on this side of the books for the organization. So in order to simplify the running of the business financially, we have the business side of the ledgers, which is made up of income and expenses. And business units will have income goals or revenue goals, and they'll have expense budgets. This allows them to make decisions about money within guardrails, basically. And this and the idea is that your finance people are reconciling these books, and everything balances out magically somehow. It's not exactly equals, but you get the idea here. I'm able to spend money on behalf of the company, earn money on behalf of the company, and it all gets taken care of on the technical side by the CTO and the finance team. IGA aspirationally wants to do the same thing, should do the same thing. It's just sometimes we have a little bit of trouble doing that. Sometimes I think we trip over ourselves. So we have this technical side as well in identity governance administration. These are all the IT systems that are out there that we want to manage. And what we want to manage in those IT systems are the accounts, the resources, and the permissions, especially the relationships among them. Right? This is the raw material that we're managing. However, and this is a hard lesson that we've learned over the years, our users can't understand this. No matter how hard we try to teach them, no matter how transparent we try to make things. A lot of it is organized in an illogical way. There's reasons for it, but the business can't understand, and sometimes IT can't even remember why. So with IGA, what we want to do is we have the business side, just like finance has the business side, in order to organize the environment and make it understandable to the business so that the business can take actions to manage access risks. And so there we have identities. Everyone's familiar with that. We have applications, the business view of IT systems, sort of. And we have entitlements and teams. So you'll notice here that I'm talking about entitlements being separate from permissions. This is very important as we start talking about policies. Okay, so first question is going to be, is this related to RBAC? Do I have to do RBAC? Oh, yes. If you want to benefit from policies, you have to get good at managing roles. I hate to say it. And ultimately, well, let's just dive into this, okay? When we think about, again, on the IT side, what's really happening, what we have are these access control policies, and we have accounts that are assigned access, right? Everything's good. Subject, verb, object, all of that type of stuff. If I was smarter about the diagram, I would have the subject, verb, object thing, but you get what I say. However, to simplify things, again, in the application realm, we have these objects that we call profiles, which are just a list of allowed access, which are basically like the objects in the subject, verb, object triumvirate. And we have groups, which are lists of users, like the subjects, right? However, we also have roles. Roles are nice because they're both a list of subjects and a list of objects, which means they can be very versatile. Now, honestly, when you're looking at a particular system, application, whatever, they're all based on these structures, these concepts, but it's not really important to know all that much about it. I like to know it when I'm looking at onboarding a new system because it helps me to understand, what to expect. But what's important here is to know that a role can do what a profile does, is just you ignore the list of subjects, and a role can do what a group does, you just ignore the list of objects. But also, you can actually get a little bit of flexibility out of that by breaking the rules sometime. And that's what we're going to talk about. Now, I will also say, for shortcut, as we talk about this, I refer to all three of these structures as permissions. Basically, anything that you manage in the real world, the digital world, meaning the stuff that you're actually manipulating with your IGA tool, are permissions. And what you want to do, of course, on the IT side, is build an accurate picture of what this world looks like, these observed states, so to speak. So this means that on the business side, we have these structures that are really roles. But I don't want to use the word roles. I know some of you might be starting to settle in and thinking, okay, because if you've seen me before, he's going to start talking about hats and buckets. No, I have a different way of talking about this now, okay? Entitlements are the roles that exist to bundle together cohesive sets of entitlements, whereas teams bundle together or combine sets of users. And these are important. It's important to maintain these distinctions. Again, entitlements look a lot like profiles, but we can break those rules. And teams look a lot like groups, but again, we can break those rules from time to time. It's important to know that. These are the anchor points for policies. So you have to do a good job with this in order to actually make effective use of policies. I like to make a distinction, because I'm trying to help people to understand this stuff. So one of the ways I talk about this is the difference between an entitlement catalog and a permission catalog. Entitlement catalog is the business-facing view. This is the business-friendly view of things, and it's like a menu. You go to the bar, you order a drink. I like a Manhattan. I don't go to the bar and say, "Hey, give me a rye." It's important, rye over bourbon, but anyway, give me a rye, some vermouth, sweet vermouth, some ice, cherry, a little bit of bitters, right? I don't say that. I say, "Give me a Manhattan," and I expect the bartender to know how to do that. This is what we should expect from IGA. We should say, "I want access to this application. I want this particular role in this application." The IGA tool has to know what that means in terms of what permissions to give, even if it's spread across multiple IT systems, even if I need to create an account or multiple accounts. I shouldn't need to know that as a business user. But I see this way too often in IGA deployments today, where we ask the users, we place too much cognitive load on our users to actually make sense of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Like, I've seen a lot of form-based systems. Do I need to know if I need to add access or modify access? How do I know? Modify access means add a group to an existing role or remove a group from an existing account. How am I supposed to know that as a business user? Whereas add access means add an account and a group. Anyway. So I'm just going to do a little techie diagram here, very simplified, but I want to give you an idea here because I want to talk about the role that attributes play and the role that roles play. I got to find a better way to say that in policies. So when we talk about a policy, what we're talking about is I'm making a decision ahead of time that I want to do this, and then when this, based on this criteria, and then when those criteria are no longer met, I want to undo what I did before and put it back to whatever the previous state was. So in this case, we have an identity, and this identity has some attributes, like every identity has, the attribute of 1 and attribute 2. We also have some teams. Again, teams exist to group users together. We have policies for these teams. This policy will attach to an identity, or this team 1 will attach to the identity when the attribute value of 1 is equal to val. This is a very contrived case, but it gets the point across, right? And so we can do this, right? We can automatically assign, and of course, if the value of attribute 1 changes, that team would be removed, and maybe another team might get added, right? That's the basics of policy. This is really simple. Now, on the entitlement side, we have some more policies. Again, these are bundles of permissions. This is the stuff that people actually want. Teams are just nice ways to group people together, and they make the policies more legible. So entitlement 1 says, give this to anyone who has team 1. So you can see I have the dotted line here, which means I'm referencing that. I'm not assigning this entitlement to team 1. I'm not nesting this entitlement in team 1. We'll see what happens. But you can see the other policies here. I think they're self-explanatory. What I'm doing, though, is I'm assigning entitlement 1 to identity, because identity is a member of team 1, based on this membership in team 1. Now, this is a lot of trouble to go through. This seems complex. What is the benefits of this? Well, there's a couple benefits now. I could conceivably put attribute value, make those policies based on the attribute values themselves. However, a couple things. Number 1, what happens, and this happens, I shouldn't say what happens or when, but when this happens, when it happens that HR or whomever these attributes come from decides we're going to change this attribute taxonomy. These attributes are going to have the same name, are going to have different values, but they're going to mean roughly the same thing. There's going to be a few changes. We're doing a little bit of reorganization. Just departmental changes or location code changes. These things happen, okay? If we were putting those attribute values directly in those policies, you can imagine that we're going to have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of these policies all over the place. We have to do like a search and replace through those policies to find all the instances of it and make those changes in a way that allows us to leave things relatively the way they were before. Otherwise, a whole bunch of people are going to lose access and gain access, and it's going to be a mess. So what we want to do is we want to use these teams as a way to basically represent the meaning of these attributes so that our policies become better. This is why you want roles. Okay? Another thing about this. I want someone to have everything that you get with Team 1, but they're not part of the Team 1 policy because they're in a different department, say, or whatever, right? Why not? I should just be able to add them to Team 1 temporarily, and then they can get everything that comes from that. I shouldn't have to go back to HR and change their attribute just to make the policies work. So the whole point of this, and this is why I have this, roles make better attributes than attributes themselves. This is something that they've learned in the attribute-based access community as well, or policy-based access, I guess, as well. That when people ask, does it mean we don't need to do roles? No. In fact, if you want to make your policies legible and flexible, you have to do roles, and you have to do it well. So, how do we do roles well? Well, I have a little model here. LVC plus G. So, you want to focus on 3 attributes. There's other attributes that you focus on when you're doing roles, but there's 3 that are measurable and that are somewhat contradictory. But and this is like an optimization problem. Remember from calculus, probably, right? Is that you want to minimize this and maximize this, and so you're trying to find the right value that'll get you there, or the right range of values that will get you there. In the same way, you want to maximize leverage. What does that mean? Leverage is doing more with less work. You want to have powerful roles that will, or entitlements in this case, powerful entitlements that will cover the broadest range of people possible and the broadest range of access possible. You want to have low volatility. You want to minimize volatility. What does that mean? That means that you don't want to have to go back and redesign those roles every time something changes in the organization. So what is that? What's the upshot of that? Well, most organizations think it's a good idea to start out with what I'll call middle out roles, right? Where they'll go department by department and say, we're going to limit our risk with roles, so we're going to model roles for this department. We might ask managers to say, tell us what your people have access to, and we'll create roles on that. Well, what you've just done is you've based roles on the most volatile part of your organization structure. So you're going to have to redesign those roles quite frequently. You've also minimized your leverage. Why? Because the same entitlements probably are being mentioned across dozens of roles. And you've increased the ceremony. What does ceremony mean? Well, once you get going with roles or entitlements or whatever you want to call them, you realize that a person can request access to this role and they only need the approval of the role owner, maybe, right? However, there's entitlements or permissions from multiple applications in this role. How do we get their approval? Well, when we're constructing the role, we have to get the buy-in from all the people whose permissions are included. The more applications we involve, the more ceremony we need. We want to minimize that. That's why we talk about entitlements being close to the applications, close to the permissions, and teams being up top. This helps us to minimize ceremony, helps us to minimize volatility, and helps us to maximize leverage. Plus, you need a governance model to go with it. How do we actually manage these policies and these roles? Because honestly, the real reason people get into role management is because they want more policy in their life. And happily, most organizations have people who are ready and willing to step into this role, the application owners. I hear this all the time. No, we don't have those people. Or those people are in the business, they don't care. No, you have people who brought in applications who care about the value that those applications are providing to the organization. They care deeply about people who can't get access when they need it. They care deeply about people whose access is removed because of your stupid use it or lose it policy that you may have in place. These are the people banging down your door to make changes to your policies, while audit and IT are basically looking at all access as risk and focusing on trying to minimize access in your environment. You want people who will know what the risk posture is for their applications. And that's why when you're modeling applications, you want to go after those business owners. I view the application owners as the true customers of identity governance administration, not IT, not operations. We also need to talk about artificial intelligence. You're not going to put in front of an application owner something that says, please tell us your policy for this entitlement. No, they don't know. So you want something that's going to look and tell them and say, here's all the people who have access. If you adopted this policy, you'd change from 0% policy-based access to 50% policy-based access. Here's the people who would have policy-based access. Here's who would have request-based access. Do you like this policy or not? And then they can choose if they want to do it. So the whole point is, tired, making suggestions for access or saying approve or deny this request or this item in the access review. Wired is, well, let's do role mining. And then finally, inspired is, let's recommend policies. There's sort of a maturity model here, and I'm running out of time. In fact, I'm probably out of time. I am out of time. But what you want to do is you want to move up, of course. And basically, a fully realized IGA deployment is going to have abstractions for teams and titles, and you can do this most of the time with your existing products. I'm not talking about getting new products. What I'm talking about is the mindset, the approach that you take. You might have to do a little work to get the policies to work the way that you need them to once you have the abstractions in place, but most products can do this. But you want to have these teams. You want to guide your entitlements and teams according to the LVC plus G model. And finally, with recommendations here, of course, start with your most critical applications. How do you define critical? Is it risk? Is it leverage opportunities? Who knows? But you want to compress the administrative surface area with entitlements. You don't want to define policies on all your permissions. You're going to end up with 5 times the number of policies that you need to manage than you would if you compress, because usually doing decent compression of permissions into roles or into entitlements will usually reduce your administrative surface area by at least 50%, if not 80%. Of course, LVCM, or LVCG, I'm sorry. And then finally, onboard more applications and repeat. That's the goal of IGA. If you're not onboarding constantly, you're failing. You need to improve coverage. So thanks a lot.